Yo, what's going on YouTube, and welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's your boy Kevin Forte. We are back again here today, continuing to look through each of our four NHL divisions going into the 2024-2025 NHL season. I'm really excited for this one. We're heading to the Atlantic Division for today's video. A lot of historic rivalries, original six franchises in this division. This is going to be a fun video, so buckle up. Get a snack, take a nice little seat, and let's enjoy this ride. So, we are going to start off at the bottom of this division. At number 8 here is the Montreal Canadiens. And I know this is probably one that Canadian fans are like, damn, another year of missing the playoffs. Hold the thought, though. So, what I'm thinking here with this team is, how good is this defense going to be? That is my genuine biggest concern, along with the goaltending. I think those are the two biggest factors for this team. This is still a very good division, and we're going to start to see that again this year. I think there is a gap between teams like Montreal and really the rest of this division, honestly. I could tell you, if anybody told me any of the other 7 teams make the playoffs in this division, I would believe you. Montreal, because of that defense and goaltending not being completely on point yet, has me concerned that they will not get there. I love their offense. You got Slavkovsky, Suzuki, Caulfield. Love that top line. Incredible. Newhook, Doc, Gallagher. Again, beautiful. Love it. Bottom 6, pretty solid. That's a pretty solid bottom 6 for a forward group across the NHL. Love it. But then the defense is where you have me concerned. Now you've got Jordan Harris and Arbor Xhekaj as your third pair. Xhekaj missed a lot of last season because of injury. Lane Hutson coming in. I think that's going to be a good addition. That's going to be a bright spot for the Canadiens this season, seeing him develop from game 1 all the way to game 82. David Savard, Gooley, and Matheson is pretty much your top 3. It's not good enough, man. I don't know what to tell you. I think that this is a team that really is lacking that number 1 and honestly number 2 defenseman. Now, I think Lane Hutson can become one of those defensemen, but you're still missing that other guy, even if Lane Hutson becomes that. And then the goaltending, Montembeault has shown he's shown great things, and then there's been points where you're like, oh my god, that's our starting goalie. Oh shit. And same thing for Caden Primo. So I'm really torn with the Habs. I'd love to say that there's a team that gets back to the playoffs. We finally get more sellout playoff games at the Bell Center. I'm not ready to do that yet. And, you know, I think we saw a little bit of a regression from guys like Gallagher as he's aging. Josh Anderson, same thing. Dvorak, for better or for worse. I still think this is unfortunately the team that's ultimately going to be at the bottom of the Atlantic with 83 points. A little bit more positive at 87 points. 7th in the division is the Ottawa Senators. I think they're an improved team. I think they definitely are an improved team. Unfortunately, they are still going to miss the playoffs, even with 87 points. But I think what we're going to see from the Senators this year is a better goaltender, better defense, and pretty much the same offense. And I'm okay with that. I think their offense wasn't really the issue last season. So you've got Brady Tkachuk, Stutzler, Giroux. That's your top pair. The big addition up front really was Noah Gregor and David Perron. I like those two guys coming in. Mikey Amadio comes in as well. So, you know, Noah Gregor going from the Leafs over to the Senators. Hopefully he'll get some more playing time. I think he's going to be motivated. David Perron has been a good goal scorer. You know what you're getting from Perron. I think that's going to continue with the Senators here. A good veteran in the locker room, too. A healthy Josh Norris would do a world of wonders for the Senators, just to kind of buckle down that second-line center role. It prevents Giroux from having to center that line and kind of hurting the first line, or maybe moving up Shane Pinto to the second line as a center and maybe giving him a little bit a bigger assignment than he's truly ready for at this moment. You know, Zach Ostapuk, Ostapchuk, however you pronounce that, he'll be centering the 4th line. Again, if things work a certain way with Norris, we might even see him jump up either to the 2nd line for a little bit or the 3rd line. So keep an eye out for that young prospect for the Senators. Defense, pretty much the same. Tyler Kleven's going to come in. He was a former 1st or 2nd round pick from the Senators. Nick Jensen comes in from the Capitals. I like that addition as well. Jacob Bernard-Docker, Thomas Chabot, Artem Zub, and Jake Sanderson. I think Sanderson, this is going to be the year where he pops off. I'm really excited to see him. And, we kind of like what we talked about with the Habs, how they don't have that like true number one center, true number one defenseman. They have that with Sanderson, and they also have Shabbat, who I definitely think is capable of leading that role in a little role if he has to, if Sanderson were to get hurt, which I don't wish, but I'm just saying. You've got two solid defensemen there with Shabbat and Sanderson. I'm very comfortable with that. And then the goaltending, Linus Ullmark coming in completely changes the game for me. I think that is a huge difference maker for this team. And I think he's going to come in and really add that stable goaltending that this team has needed so badly for so many years. They had 78 points last season, and that's kind of the thing here with Montreal, right? Like, these two teams you're going to see in a minute. The gap between Montreal and Ottawa and the rest of this division, we kind of saw that last season even. Like, Buffalo finished 6th in this division last year with 84 points. Ottawa and Montreal were finished with 78 and 76. So I think that we're going to continue to see that gap still between Ottawa, Montreal, and the rest of the division. But I think that's also because I just think in terms of matching up against those teams in their own division, which they're going to play more than the other teams in the NHL, I just don't think they're going to stack up well against them. And to be honest with you, the last couple years, they haven't stacked up well. Either of these teams have not stacked up truly that well against teams like Florida, Tampa, Boston, and Toronto. And I think that's going to continue to be a trend here in the 2024-25 season. And that means we're going to move up to the numbers are messed up here. 8, 7, 6. So at number 6 is the Detroit Red Wings. Now this is really interesting because I have both Buffalo and Detroit with 98 points. So again, just showing you the gap. That's an 11-point gap between 7 and 8 in the Atlantic and 6 and 5. That just shows you just the gap that I think there still is between teams like Detroit and Buffalo, kind of moving their way closer to the teams at the top of the division than teams like Ottawa and Montreal, who are still kind of on their way up there. I think the big difference between these teams, you might be asking yourself, Kevin, why do you think there's that much of a gap? It really comes down to the depth. And like I said, for Montreal, the defense still scares me, and the goaltending still scares me. I like Ottawa a little bit more because of the goaltending, but is Josh Norris going to be healthy this season? How much more are we going to see from Claude Giroux? He is continuing to age. Is that going to be an issue? Those are the things that I'm thinking about. I'm not so worried about that with teams like Detroit and Buffalo, and you'll see why in a second. So for the Detroit Red Wings, I technically have them slotted here at 6. I think this is a team that's going to be around where they were last season, which is fine, but can they get that extra 2, 3, 4 points to get to the playoffs? That's going to be the difference, and I cannot read into the future. So I can't tell you for a fact. This is one that I'm very uncomfortable saying, but I do have them missing the playoffs, but it is going to be so damn close. It is going to be so damn close for the Detroit Red Wings. I like Tarasenko coming in there. Tyler Mott is also another addition there. Patrick Kane returning to the team. I like that. On the blue line, still some, I think Ben Sherratt still being a top pairing defenseman. Don't love that. Jeff Petrie, Gustafsson, and Ole Mata. Yes, I like it. No, I don't in other ways. I think losing Jake Wallman, I was not a fan of that trade. To be honest with you, I really didn't like that move. I think he was a perfect defenseman here. I understand salary-wise and things like that, but I think that was a huge loss for them. I truly believe that. He was a perfect fit for where he was, and I think having Sherratt on the top pair is kind of a glaring example of now Seider not playing with Wallman now means that somebody else has to move out of a spot that they should be at, and now moving somebody else up into the lineup that maybe shouldn't be there. Simon Edvinsson is a promising young defenseman. We're going to see him this season. That is a bright spot. And I want to see maybe some of the other young defensemen that they have on this team. Are we going to see some of these other young prospects that the Red Wings have been developing in GR? Are we going to see them finally crack the lineup? And the other issue I have with the Red Wings, and that's kind of what I think separates them from teams like Buffalo and Boston, is the goaltending. Because you've got Cam Talbot and Alex Lyon, and I am not comfortable with that. I really am not. I think that this is a team that You need to ride the hot hand goalie, and hopefully one of these guys does that. But Cam Talbot and Lyon have had their moments of greatness and their moments of really having a hard time and struggling. I don't know which version of those goalies we're going to see. I think the offense is still good enough where they are going to be right in that picture. The defense is serviceable enough where I know what I'm getting from them, unlike teams like Ottawa and Montreal. So that's really the big difference. I think the defense, as much as it's something I'm not a fan of, is okay enough where I know what we're getting. And then the goaltending has me genuinely concerned, but in a similar way where you kind of know what you're getting from Talbot and Lyon. It's not super spectacular, but it's serviceable enough where they're going to be in the playoff hunt. I truly believe that. Unless some crazy freak injuries happen, you never can predict that. But I think they're going to be right there in the hunt. And I have them finishing with 98 points. Buffalo Sabres, same thing, 98 points for them. But I think they're a lot further along. I think they've got a lot more depth. But we're going to see why in a second, why I have them where I have them. The Buffalo Sabres are a team that's been waiting a very long time to make the playoffs. And let's be honest, having the longest streak in sports of missing the playoffs is something I think the Buffalo Sabres really want to get rid of. I think they want that to go away. More so than anybody. And looking at this team, it's fairly similar to what we've seen, but I think because of the development of some of these players, it's going to go a long way in them improving. JJ Peterka, Thompson, and Tuck is your top line. Chef's kiss from me. Zucker, Cousins, and Quinn. Perfect combo. I love Jason Zucker coming in there. He reminds me so much of Jason Pominville. The way he plays, the way he carries himself. Whenever I looked at him, and yeah, maybe because he also played for the Minnesota Wild going to the Sabres, yeah, there's a little bit of that too, but I just think the way they play is very similar, and I love that. I think he's a perfect fit there. Greenway, McLeod, and Benson, a little bit shaky, but I'm good with it. Beck Malenstein, I loved him in Hershey. Hopefully he does well in the NHL with the Buffalo Sabres, but kind of an unknown there. Sam Lafferty, he's been bouncing around between the Leafs and the Blackhawks the last couple years. Hopefully he finds a good home here in Buffalo. Nicholas Aube-Kubel, he's been kind of bouncing around too, so he's hopefully going to find a legit spot there. Now this is one of the real strengths in the Atlantic Division, and I don't think anybody's really talking about it. But the Buffalo Sabres now have a 3 defensive group right now that is absolutely better than the 3 teams I just mentioned. Bowen Byram and Rasmus Dahlin is your top pair. And then you've got Owen Power there as well. All 3 of those guys legitimately could be a number 1 defenseman. Maybe not on Detroit. And maybe not on Ottawa with Sanderson. But I would say those guys would be huge improvements to any of those defenses. I think this is a Buffalo Sabres team with this defense right now. This, I think, is what's going to separate them from maybe making the playoffs and snagging a wild card spot or missing. I think this is the difference that they haven't had. You have a little bit more veteran leadership there. As crazy as this sounds, Dahlin, Byram, and now Power, all at least 2 years in the NHL. It's the second year for Power. I think it's going to come down to guys like Samuelson. Can he do as good as he did last year? Yoki Haraju, can he hold up? And Clifton, who's been there for a couple years. I like this Sabres defense a lot better than I could say I ever really have in my time watching the Sabres. Really, okay, maybe since the mid-2010s or the early 2010s, right, when they had that run, that 1 year. UPL and Devin Levi is still a concern. And that's why I still have them at 8, 7, 6, 5. I still have them at 5 because I think the goaltending and all the other teams in front of them are slightly, if not marginally better. And I think that could end up being the difference truly. The depth stepping up for the Sabres on the blue line and up front forwards and the goaltending is going to be so important for the Sabres. And that's been an issue for a little while. And I think that was a problem for them last season. Hopefully they get over the hump. I really do. I hate seeing a record like that long, for that passionate of a fan base. They need to get to the playoffs, and I really hope this is the year they do. Maybe not at the price of the Islanders, but hopefully the Buffalo Sabres do make the playoffs. I would be okay with the Sabres making the playoffs. 1, 2, 3, 4. So now we're moving up to number 4. Number 4 here is the Boston Bruins. This is a weird spot for the Bruins because now I think with the moves they made, this team is still on the hunt. And I think the addition of Elias Lindholm is going to be the difference whether they make the playoffs or not. And I hate to put that much pressure on Elias Lindholm, but he has had such a Jekyll and Hyde career. He did so well in Carolina. Then he went to Calgary, and we know things didn't go so well there. He's been bouncing around a little bit. Can he make Boston? He needs to replace Patrice Bergeron, and that is such a demanding, difficult task. But that's really what you're replacing here. And the Bruins didn't do that last season, and they still made the playoffs. Now you add a guy like Lindholm who has a lot more potential, a high ceiling, compared to what the Bruins were working with last year. I think it's a testament to just how good of a coach Jim Montgomery is. I think it's a testament to just how good that culture has been in Boston, even with guys like Bergeron and Krejci and Chara leaving over the years. They still are the Boston Bruins that we remember, even from that 2011 run. Even though a lot of those players are no longer there, there is still a similar team there. Now, Zacha, Lindholm, Pasternak is your top line. Love it. I think that's going to work out really well. Marchand, Coyle, and Geekie. I think Geekie, I loved that move last summer when they brought him in. I think we're going to see that again this year. Matt Poitras, love him. I think he could eventually be taking Coyle for that top six center role, maybe even surpassing him as the second line center of this team at some point. You got Frederick and Bergeau, who also are going to be there. John Beecher, we're going to see coming in again. I'm really excited to see him coming in again for the Boston Bruins for a full season. I'm expecting good things for him. Max Jones and Mark Kastelik to kind of round out your bottom six. Big Z, and I know they don't want to call him that. He doesn't want to call himself that anymore, but Nikita Zadorov and Charlie McAvoy. You have your shutdown defenseman with Zadorov, and then you've got McAvoy. I love that. You've got your offensive puck-moving defenseman with McAvoy. Let him go to town. Let him play. Do his thing, and Zadorov will be your shutdown. Hampus Lindholm. So just to make things confusing, the Bruins had to have both Lindholms in the NHL on the same team. So we've got Hampus Lindholm on the blue line playing alongside Brandon Carlo, and Elias Lindholm, who's going to be the first line center with Zacha and Pasternak, okay? Matt Lohrei and Andrew Peeke is going to round out your bottom six for the Bruins blue line. And this is going to be the one that, you know, a little bit of a sad emoji, because we've got Jeremy Swayman coming back as the starter for the Bruins. I'm fine with that. But no more Linus Ullmark. Linus Ullmark has now since moved on to the Ottawa Senators, staying in the division. That hurts even more. But we now have Jonas Korpisalo. And I think that this is one that really, I don't know what version of Korpisalo we're getting. I think the Bruins they are confident in Jeremy Swayman that he's going to take the lead more. And that was kind of expected when they traded Linus Ullmark out, was we were going to see more of Jeremy Swayman. But Korpisalo is still going to have to handle his own. And I think that there is going to be a point in the season where he does struggle. Maybe it's early, I don't know, but I think there is going to be a point where he struggles a little bit. So hopefully he's able to do enough to get this team to the playoffs. He struggled the last couple of years. I'm hoping for the best for him. I'm not cheering for his demise. I'm just a little bit worried, a little bit shaky on Korpisalo. But with that said, I still have the Bruins finishing with 99 points and probably punching their ticket to the playoffs once again in 2025. All right, so now let's round this thing out. So the top three teams in the Atlantic at number 3 is the Tampa Bay Lightning. So the Tampa Bay Lightning are back, and they're still here. They're not going away quite yet. Jake Gensel, the biggest addition in free agency, of course, goes to the Tampa Bay Lightning. It did come at a hefty cost. They traded out Steven Stamkos. They traded out Mikhail Sergachev. This is a different-looking Tampa Bay Lightning team. But they've done this before. They've made controversial moves. They've made polarizing moves. You know, we've seen the Vegas Golden Knights do this recently, and they've won Stanley Cups despite that. I think this is a situation here with Tampa. The window is not closed yet on the Tampa Bay Lightning. Don't forget these guys. Jake Gensel, Point, and Kucherov is your top line. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. I don't have to speculate much on that one. Hagel, Cirelli, and Cam Atkinson coming in. Not the name I was expecting to go to Tampa on the second line. We'll see if there's some movement there because Connor Sheary is also here, so maybe he jumps into that role. I think there is a gap there. I think there's a hole on that second line for the Tampa Bay Lightning. So if we get to the trade deadline, maybe they want to trade out I don't know what prospects they have left, but I could see them trying to add, if they're a playoff contender, where they are in the standings right now, maybe third in that division, trying to get home ice advantage or, sure up for the playoffs. I can see them adding another top 6 center to this team. There definitely seems to be a hole there. Defense is different. Definitely different. I think I really like the left side of this defense. I will say that. You've got Big V, Victor Hedman, alongside Darren Radish. There's a lot of risk there, okay? The second pair is very solid still. Cherenak and Ryan McDonough? I thought that guy went to Nashville. They did bring him back from Nashville, so Ryan McDonough will be back on the blue line for the I almost said the Preds, will be back on the blue line for the Bolts next season. And I think this is the one that's a big wild card. I'm really excited and yet a little bit nervous because J.J. Moser, who was a part of that Sergachev trade, nobody's talking about that. I think he is going to be a huge addition here to the Tampa Bay Lightning. I think he's going to be an instant impact to this team. That is the biggest piece to this Tampa, between all the trades they've made. Yes, they brought in Connor Geekie, who was also a part. He was a top 10 draft pick of the Coyotes a couple years ago. Now it's the Utah team, right? But he was drafted by the Coyotes. So you've got Connor Geekie and J.J. Moser, who were the big pieces in that Sergachev trade. I think Connor Geekie will eventually be a top 6 center on this team or a top 6 winger. He could potentially be that. Maybe he is that internal addition to the Lightning at the deadline, right? Because they don't have the assets to make that move. Maybe if there's enough development from Geekie, Connor Geekie just slots right into that second line and kind of jumps in, and that's boom. That's your playoff addition internally. J.J. Moser is a very good defenseman. Nobody talked about him last year because, well, really for the last couple years. He's been on the Arizona Coyotes. I think that's a really solid pickup for them. I really think that's one that nobody's talking about. But to be honest with you, Darren Radish as your first right shot defenseman and Nick Perbix, who was questionable last season, I am genuinely concerned about that right side blue line for the Bolts. And there was a lot of talk that maybe they would try to trade out Cherenak's contract or buy him out. But that right side, for as good as that left shot defense is for Tampa, the right side has definitely taken a hit, especially with Sergachev getting traded out. I'm very interested to see how this team does because that defense, it is boom or bust. And I love Hedman and McDonough and Moser. But like I said, there's still another half to that blue line that definitely has me a little bit concerned. And then in between the pipes, you've got Jonas Johansson and Andrei Vasilevsky returning. No changes there. It's Big Vasi coming back again. We'll see how that does, but I'm not terribly concerned about Vasi. I think he'll be okay. Things didn't go as well as he would have liked last season, but I don't think that's indicative of anything going into this season. The defending Stanley Cup champions, the Florida Panthers at this point, 105 points is my prediction for next season. I think they're still the Florida Panthers. They kept a lot of that team together. Yeah, they didn't keep everybody. They weren't able to keep Montour. They weren't able to keep some of the other guys. But they still got Reinhart coming back. Verhaeghe came back. Bennett came back. They were able to keep most of this team intact. In between the pipes, you've still got Bobrovsky and Knight. I like that. Defense, Forsling, Ekblad, Mikkola, Kulikov, Uvis Balinskis, and Nate Schmidt. The only real difference here is instead of Montour, you've got Balinskis coming in. That could be an interesting move. We'll see if that works out for them. I hope it does. But that's one that I'm a little bit, okay, this could work out great, or maybe not. But worst case, they've still got Kulikov, Mikkola, Ekblad, and Forsling. That's still a really solid defense, worthy of getting at least 100 points in the Atlantic next season. Forward group, I love their forward group. You've got the combinations of Verhaeghe, Barkov, and Reinhart. There's a lot of balance and depth with this forward group. Kachuk, Bennett, Rodriguez, Samuskevich, Lundell, Lusterinen, Jesper Boqvist, Thomas Nosek, and Mackenzie Entwistle. So a little bit of beef and a little bit of a bigger bottom six. And I think really the reason they brought in Entwistle was kind of the replacement to Ryan Lomberg, because now they no longer have Ryan Lomberg, no longer a member of the Florida Panthers. He went up to Calgary. So that's kind of your group there. I think this team is very capable of doing what they did last year. You still have that great center core with Barkov, Bennett, and Lundell. There aren't much better in the NHL, especially in this division. I really like that group. And then that gives us at number 1 with 111 points. They've heard this story before. Don't lift the cup up yet. Don't do the July Stanley Cup parade. We've seen this before, but I truly believe the Toronto Maple Leafs, they are built for the regular season. And that is the highest praise and the most disrespectful thing you could say at the same time, because they are a very good team that can do a lot of good things during the regular season. How are they going to perform in the playoffs? That's all that matters. And the Toronto Maple Leafs made a massive decision earlier this week, stripping the captaincy of John Tavares and giving it to Austin Matthews. Is that the thing that changes the dynamic of this team? Is that the wake-up call to this team that gets them on track? I have no freaking clue, but they're trying it. And honestly, I think it's a great move. I know it's a very controversial move. You can't worry about hurting feelings in this business. And I think that the responsibility that John Tavares has had the last couple years, the lack of change to the team, they had to do this. I get it. And I'm going to make an entire video talking about it. If you haven't watched it already, make sure to check it out. John Tavares needed to have less spotlight here. He needs to do what he needs to do. I think that was part of the problem with his career on the Islanders. I think just the amount of pressure being the captain, it wasn't working. And I think this is good for him. It's good for Matthews. I think it's going to change the overall dynamic of the team here. I think this is what they had to do. And looking at this forward group, this is a good team. And it's not all that different than what we've seen. You know, I'm trying to look at this team. It's basically the same team we saw last year. You know, Bobby McMahon playing with Tavares and Nylander. Nyes playing with Matthews and Marner. Not much different here. Domi's back. Reeves is back. Right? A couple of changes on the blue line, which I love. I think Riley playing with Tanev. I put Tanev as one of my top 10 defensemen in the NHL right now. I think that's a pretty high praise. I really like Tanev. You know what you're getting from Chris Tanev. Every single night, every single year, whether he was playing in Vancouver, Calgary, Dallas. I've got a lot of knowledge on this guy. He's going to come in Toronto. You know what you're getting. I really like him as an addition there. And playing alongside Riley, who is a little bit of a liability on defense, that's a perfect fit there. OEL and Lindgren, I could see them playing with that a little bit because both those guys are very moving the puck forward and offensive-minded. So maybe there's some changes there. That's going to be interesting to see how the power play works with those guys, right? Is Liljegren or Ekman Larson going to get the lion's share of the power play minutes as a defenseman? I don't know. Simon Benoit and Jake McCabe is your third pair. Goaltending is pretty similar. You've got Joseph Woll and Anthony Stolarz. They're running it with Joseph Woll. That is the biggest question for the Leafs, is how is that goaltending going to work? Stolarz and Woll is definitely risky. But the Leafs are going for it. And I think that with the situation for this team, with this circumstance, the pressure, the expectations, the Leafs have to get further in the playoffs this year. It's not enough. And it's been so long now where even making the conference finals or the cup final would be almost just as, if not more heartbreaking than just losing in the first round again. I don't know. Anything but a Stanley Cup at this point is not enough for the Leafs. And that's the unfortunate reality. And the good news is, you look at a team like Edmonton out west, they can never get it done, right? They'll never get it done. They'll never make the playoffs. They'll never do that. People forget. And this is a good quote to remember. Think of teams like the Capitals or the Blues. They could never get over that hump. They could never get past the first round. They could never get past the second round, right? The Blackhawks. The Blues could never get past the Blackhawks or the Wild or the Canucks. The Capitals could never get past Pittsburgh. And then they did. So just because a team like the Leafs hasn't done well in the playoffs, a team like the Leafs hasn't had that success, doesn't mean they're not capable of it. And just like we talk about with Edmonton every year, how they can never get past the first round, how they can never get past this team, they were one win away from winning the Stanley Cup this year. So all the years that they couldn't, they magically could this year. So keep that in mind. Just because a team hasn't done something before doesn't mean they won't this year. And I think the Leafs are going to be that team this year. I truly believe that. And we're going to talk about that more in other videos. When I talk about the Leafs, I want to give them high praise here because I think they made some of the right moves here. They added some defensemen. They kept the offense intact. They didn't trade Marner or Nylander. They stripped Tavares of the captaincy, gave it to the rightful player in Matthews. Just goaltending. If they could figure that out, I think they're going to be okay. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. What do you think of this video? Just to run through it again, Montreal is going to finish at 8th, Ottawa at 7, Detroit at 6, Buffalo at 5, Boston at 4, Tampa at 3, with home ice advantage, Florida at 2, and then the Toronto Maple Leafs winning the Atlantic Division with 111 points. And also, this is kind of a deep dive into the rest of my series. The Toronto Maple Leafs win the President's Trophy with 111 points. 111 points. That's actually fairly low considering the last couple of years. Winning the President's Trophy in 2025. That's going to do it for today's video, guys. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you again next time.